Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic that might not sound too glamorous, maybe, but it's absolutely vital to how well any organization runs internal audit.
It really is.
And you've sent us a fascinating source for our own deep dive, the Internal Audit Handbook, Management with the SAP Audit Roadmap. Now, this might conjure images of, endless spreadsheets.
Yeah, people tend to think that.
But trust us, it's actually a surprisingly insightful look at how a global giant like SAP, through its Global Internal Audit Services, or GAS, makes sure things are running smoothly and, well, effectively.
Exactly. And our mission here isn't really to get bogged down in the absolute nitty-gritty of SAP's specific processes.
Yeah.
Instead, we want to kind of extract the core wisdom from this handbook,
Hmm.
the fundamental principles and practical approaches to internal auditing that really highlight its strategic importance.
Right. Moving beyond that old idea of auditors as just box checkers.
Precisely. We're moving way beyond that.
Okay. And this handbook, it acknowledges it's written for quite a diverse audience, doesn't it? From newcomers to seasoned pros.
Yeah, people looking for different levels of detail.
Mm.
And while the examples are from SAP and GIAS, the underlying concepts,
Hmm.
they're really broadly applicable.
So, ready to unpack what makes internal audit tick.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Let's dive in. Maybe we can start with a really fundamental shift
Yeah.
the handbook highlights. The evolving role of internal audit.
Okay.
It wasn't always seen as it is today. There's been quite a significant move away from being just a purely investigative function,
Just looking into problems after they've already happened.
Exactly. Towards being a crucial corporate management instrument.
Ah, that's a key distinction. So, not just the detectives after the fact, but more like a proactive partner in the ongoing management process.
That's it. And we see this deliberate move away from trying to oversee absolutely everything, which is impossible anyway,
Right.
to a much smarter risk-focused approach, concentrating efforts where they can have the biggest impact.
That makes sense. It probably resonates with, how anyone manages priorities, focus on what really matters.
And what's fascinating here is that even with this closer involvement in supporting management, the handbook is really adamant about maintaining complete independence.
That's crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely. Internal audit can't become just another operational arm. It needs that objective distance to provide, well, unbiased assessments.
Yeah.
Like having an independent advisor who's invested in your success but isn't afraid to point out potential pitfalls.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the perception has changed. The handbook openly talks about that old box checker stereotype,
Mm-hmm.
the folks just making sure the paperwork's in order. But there's a growing understanding, as this handbook shows, of how internal audit contributes to real efficiency and effectiveness.
Exactly. They're not just preventing problems. They're helping things run better.
Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? You mentioned the audit roadmap.
Yes, the audit roadmap. Think of it as the blueprint, the process model for conducting an internal audit. It's cyclical, with 5 key stages. 5 stages.
Okay.
First, there's planning what to audit, why audit it. Then, preparation, getting everything ready.
Mm-hmm.
Followed by execution, actually doing the audit work.
Mm-hmm.
Then reporting the findings. And finally, and this is crucial, the follow-up.
Ah, making sure recommendations are actually acted upon.
Exactly. It's a structured approach.
Ensures
Yeah.
thoroughness, accountability.
So it's a complete A to Z for an audit.
Yeah.
And within this roadmap, you mentioned scopes.
Yes, scopes. These are essentially the specific business areas or organizational units under review. What's clever is that these scopes are like building blocks. They can be used individually or combined in different ways across various audits. It allows for flexibility, for targeted reviews.
And what determines these scopes? Is it just random?
No, not at all. That's where materiality comes in. It's about focusing on what's truly significant, what really matters to the organization.
Got it.
The handbook gives some concrete examples of what SAP considers core scopes. These are the fundamental areas getting regular attention.
Well, in finance, for instance, they look at general accounting, accounts payable, accounts receivable, the core money flows, and asset accounting.
Makes sense. What else?
We also see human resources covered. Scopes for things like compensation and benefits, recruiting, payroll, all critical stuff.
Absolutely. People and money.
Right. Then there are areas maybe less obvious, but just as important. Intellectual property, IT systems, the software development labs, license agreements, even purchasing.
Wow, okay. It really shows how broad the reach of internal audit can be. That might spark some ideas for listeners about key areas in their own world that need a closer look.
Definitely. And the handbook also distinguishes audits based on geography. Local, regional, and global.
Right. For a company like SAP, that's essential.
Very. For issues with worldwide implications, like certain financial regulations, there's a strong emphasis on standardization. You need consistent practices across the whole organization.
That makes perfect sense for a multinational. Okay, then there's the audit cycle itself. It's not just a one-off thing.
No, it's continuous. The handbook describes different stages. The initial basic audit, then status checks to monitor progress on any issues found, and then a formal follow-up to confirm that agreed actions have been effectively implemented. It's all about continuous improvement.
Not just finding problems and walking away.
Exactly. And we should also mention ad hoc audits.
Ah, the unscheduled ones.
Yeah, the ones that pop up when there's an urgent, need a specific issue to investigate, or maybe just quick fact-finding. It shows internal audit needs to be agile, responsive.
Okay, so that gives us a good handle on the process. Now, the handbook also stresses some key elements for internal auditing to be truly effective. Independence and objectivity seem right at the top.
Absolutely fundamental. The handbook really emphasizes that internal audit needs to be free from any biases, any unit-specific preferences.
That must be a challenge sometimes, especially in a collaborative culture like SAP's.
It can be. The handbook even addresses that how close working relationships could potentially, even unintentionally, cloud judgment. It's a constant balancing act.
Yeah, I can see that. Being integrated enough to understand the business, but keeping that arm's length perspective. Communication and coordination are also highlighted.
Essential. Given how many different parts of the organization internal audit interacts with both internally and externally clear, consistent communication is paramount.
And it's not just formal reports, is it?
No, what's insightful is the emphasis on both formal and informal channels. This helps get a comprehensive understanding, ensures consistency in findings, and, crucially, making sure results reach the right management levels for action.
Then there's the audit charter. What's that about?
That's the formal document. It outlines the responsibilities, the authority of the internal audit function. Think of it like their mission statement and operating principles combined.
And it's not just for internal use.
No, the handbook suggests it's a valuable tool for explaining internal audit's role to other parts of the organization, too. And importantly, it's not static.
Ah, it can change.
Yes, if internal audit's responsibilities evolve, the recommendation is to update the charter to reflect those changes, formalizing their role. It underlines how dynamic internal audit needs to be.
Right. And of course, resources. You can't do much without people and budget.
Exactly. The handbook points out the need for sufficient resources, people, skills, budget to meet objectives and fulfill the mandate. Effective oversight requires investment.
Makes sense. Anything else under key elements?
Yes. Integrating audit results. Findings shouldn't exist in a vacuum. They need to feed into the company's overall information flow, informing decision-making at all relevant management levels.
Okay. And a proactive approach.
Definitely. Moving beyond just reacting to problems, aiming to identify potential risks and areas for improvement before they become major issues. Foresight and prevention.
And finally, documentation. Always important.
Critical. Thorough, accurate documentation is presented as inseparable from auditing. Key documents, like those scope definitions, are ideally managed electronically now.
Okay, good overview of the key elements. Shall we get into some specific audit areas and techniques mentioned? Financial audits, for example.
Sure. The handbook touches on practical examples, like auditing accruals, things like estimated bonuses or vacation pay. The focus is on accuracy, proper reporting.
Right. What about things like accounts payable?
Yeah, when looking at what a company owes suppliers, the handbook highlights checking segregation of duties, making sure different people handle different parts of the process, requesting, approving, paying to prevent errors or even fraud by one person having too much control. They also look at open invoices, verify exchange rates.
And revenue recognition. That sounds crucial for a software company.
Hugely important. The handbook mentions SOP 97-2 criteria, basically rules about when a software company can officially book revenue.
So you can't just count it when the contract is signed.
Not necessarily. It's about ensuring the revenue is truly earned, delivery is reasonably assured, it prevents, premature or inflated reporting, vital for investor trust.
Okay. What about IT audits?
The main goal there is assessing if the tech systems and processes comply with policies and standards. Covers planning, organization, security, access, data protection, everything.
It's a big area.
It is. And the handbook emphasizes bringing in both internal and external perspectives for IT audits.
Fraud audits must be sensitive.
Very. They focus on high-risk areas, naturally, and involve close collaboration with legal, security, HR, sometimes external auditors too. Disclosure of discovered fraud is also increasingly important.
And SOX audits, that's the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, right?
Yes. The handbook mentions sections 302, CEO-CFO certification of financials, and 404, management assessing internal controls over financial reporting.
That's a big one.
It is. The COSO framework, a kind of best practice model for controls, is usually the foundation. And companies often have specific roles like SOX managers or champions to drive this.
And finally, global audits. We touched on this.
Right. Balancing global standards with local needs, leveraging local expertise but keeping central oversight, often using virtual teams across regions. It's complex but necessary today.
Okay, so they do all this work. How do they measure if internal audit itself is effective?
Good question. The handbook covers performance measurement and quality assurance. They talk about using KPIs, key performance indicators, and ratios to assess efficiency and effectiveness.
KPIs for the auditors themselves.
Exactly. And sometimes an overall audit rating system, like that traffic light green, yellow, red, to quickly summarize findings.
And the follow-up gets rated too.
Yes, that follow-up rating checks how well recommendations were implemented. It often goes and reports to management and the board. Benchmarking is also key.
Comparing themselves.
Yeah, against internal targets and external industry best practices. Helps drive improvement.
Then quality assurance.
Underpinning all of it. The handbook mentions peer reviews, like getting rated by the Institute of Internal Auditors, IIA, to ensure they're meeting professional standards and always improving.
So, looking ahead now, where does the handbook see internal audit going?
Well, there's an expectation of an even greater emphasis on proactive roles.
More prevention.
Yes, potentially using integrated IT systems to continuously spot potential audit areas, linking audit software with business applications. Imagine systems flagging potential issues in real time.
Yeah, that's quite a shift.
It is. And what's interesting is the idea that internal audit will increasingly need to highlight the added value it brings beyond just assurance.
How so?
Through more forward-looking reporting, proactively identifying improvement opportunities, really demonstrating how they contribute to overall success and resilience by stopping problems before they start.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, looking through the lens of the SAP handbook, it's really clear, isn't it? Internal audit in modern companies is way more than just compliance.
Oh, absolutely. It's dynamic, indispensable, plays a critical role in strategy, risk mitigation, driving continuous improvement.
And for you, our listener, this raises, I think, a really important point. Consider these principles we've discussed: independence, risk focus, communication, improvement.
Yeah, even though the handbook focuses on a huge corporation, how might these apply in your organization? Or even just in how you manage your own work?
Right. What questions does this spark for your understanding of how organizations, big or small, can ensure they're operating effectively, ethically? Something to maybe mull over.
Definitely food for thought.
Indeed. And if you are interested in digging even deeper, the Internal Audit Handbook itself is clearly a very comprehensive resource. Thanks for joining us for this illuminating deep dive.